Good morning, guys. Welcome back to another video. This video right here is going to be about, again, touching upon the growth mindset. All right. So I know I'm a proponent of developing a growth mindset. You know, we talked about it in the last few videos, and we're going to continue talking about it because I believe that this topic can make or break you, make or break your success in life, in all aspects of life. So I'm going to touch upon it mainly for myself, but hopefully you guys will find value in it too. You know, maybe one day my kids will be watching this video too. So without further ado, just get into it. So I was reading the definition, and it went something like this, definition of growth mindset. Growth mindset is the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed with effort and persistence, with learning. It is linked to increased resilience, better emotional regulation, and improved long-term cognitive focus or cognitive performance. So with the growth mindset, a couple things I want to touch upon. First of all, a lot of people don't know this, but as they get older, the brain is still malleable. You know, you can still teach an old dog new tricks per se. You can still develop synaptic connections between neurons, you know, that help you grow. You know, never too old, it's never too late. I hope I'm spelling this right. The brain is still malleable. You know, as kids, we soak things up. You know, we're like a sponge. As you get older, you get complacent. You don't think you're able to learn or adjust or be flexible to growth, but you are. You know, something else I want to talk about is to bring back the fixed versus growth mindset. You know, identify when you do have that fixed mindset, when you're closed. Identify and reframe that fixed mindset. Reframe those thoughts. You know, for instance, I'll never get better at this. You know, flip that around. Turn it into a growth mindset thought. You know, growth-oriented alternative, which does state that with practice, I can improve. You know, challenge those thoughts. Whenever you feel a negative thought come in, kick it out. You know, replace it. Replace it with a positive thought. Just come up with something positive. Or if you have evidence-based affirmations, evidence-based wins, you know, tell yourself, hey, I completed that task. I can do this, right? So you want to turn fixed into growth, right? With that, you want to challenge every negative thought that comes into your mind. You know, turn it around. Turn it around to a positive. No matter how big, no matter how small, you want to turn it around immediately. You know, this is how you train your brain. It's like going to the gym, you know, you put in those reps. This is exactly the same thing for your mind. You got to put in those reps. You know, growth takes time. Growth takes those reps, that consistency. Another thing is to encourage the journey. Process focused goals over the result. Outcome based goals, right? So you want to encourage. I'm sorry for my handwriting, guys, but hopefully you guys can read this. Take some screenshots or whatever, take some notes. So process-focused goals. So you want to encourage that over outcome-based. So basically the result. Yeah, you want to know what the result is, but when you're on the journey of getting there, you want to encourage those process-focused goals. You want to celebrate them. You know, it's okay to celebrate the small goals. Get that little bit of dopamine hit. You know, keep going. That builds the resilience. It's part of the journey. Okay, over outcome-based goals. Right? So for instance, process-focused. An example would be, I'll practice dribbling, the basketball for 30 minutes a day versus outcome-based. I want to play for the NBA. Yeah, you have that outcome-based goal in mind, but you still want to focus on the process. And that's something that people fail to do, or even something I fail to do. It's a struggle, but definitely possible, right? Okay. So, if you have to use a framework to meet those goals, one would be the SMART goal framework. Failure. Let's talk about failure. Like I said in the previous video, some people see failure as the end. It's not. Failure can be a stepping stone, and that's just another way of looking at it. You have to develop that way of looking at it, that perspective, and that's what comes along with the growth mindset. Just those repetitions. Every time you fail, boom, don't get discouraged. It's gonna hurt, it's gonna suck, but you just gotta keep moving. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll be like, well, I feel I can do this, but there's a chance I could fail. Embrace the failure. Learn from it, right? Reframe setbacks as essential for brain development and learning. You can incorporate journaling. Incorporate journaling, reflect on what you did wrong and how you can do it better. Reinforce doing it better. Incremental progress from that persistence will pay dividends in the future. You just can't see it now, but you have to believe that it will happen. All right. Let's move on. We're almost done. All right, so you have to train your mind to embrace the stress. It's part of the process. As some Navy SEALs they say, embrace the suck. That was a saying when I went to TACP training. They said, embrace the suck. Only good day was yesterday, or the only easy day was yesterday. Right? Because you got through it. Today's a whole new set of challenges to overcome. I'll be honest, that was one of the best times of my life, being in that TACP training. Even though, it sucked physically, mentally it was exhausting as well, but man, it made you feel so alive. Just the training, just the camaraderie, just going through the suck with all those guys, man, it was just freaking awesome. I loved it. I miss it. I'll be honest. I can only push my body so far these days, but I try. But I can't emulate that or mirror that training, because you always have somebody over you pushing you, so you have to be your own physical trainer, your own motivator, see how far you can go. All right, so while you're embracing the suck, it's always important to find like-minded individuals. Right? To help you on this journey. Not all of us can get through it alone. Me, it's kind of hard. As you get older, you have awesome friends when you're young, but as you get older, it's just harder to make friends, harder to trust. It's just weird, man, but I'm working on that too. So finding like-minded people definitely help you on your lifelong journey. What else? Find out how you learn best. By doing, by watching, repetition, active recall, repeat, rinse and repeat. So another thing I keep harping on is just promoting reflection. We all need that feedback. At work we get performance feedbacks. You give your kid feedback when they're doing something right, when they're doing something wrong. That feedback helps to kind of gauge where you're at. It also helps to gauge what you need to do, how you need to improve. One more thing is be adaptable, be flexible. In the Air Force, they tell us flexibility is the key to air power, something like that. That's how you win. Adjust to the mission. Not every mission is going to come out the way you planned it. There's going to be some obstacles, there's going to be some deviations. But if you're flexible, you get through it better. You'll improvise. Same with your self-improvement journey, same with your growing your mindset. Be flexible. Lastly, what I do nowadays is I question things. I question everything. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. And some questions I ask are, what can I learn from this? Or is this helping me to reach my goal? Right? Two very important questions. Keeps you on track. What can I learn from this? Whether it be failure, whether it be success, you can learn a lot from success too. People sometimes bypass that because they got through it. They succeeded. They won. But you gotta reflect and see how you won. What did you do right? What steps did you do that may have hindered you? A lot of people tear apart when they fail or when they do something wrong, when they lose. Not a lot of people tear apart when they won because they expected it, let's say. So they don't tear it apart. Reflect on it, and that's important to do. Reflection. What else? Last question was, is this helping me reach my goal? I say that's one of the most important questions you can ask yourself, because a lot of people falter so easily. I've been consistent with posting videos for the last week or so, 10 days maybe. And I'm gonna try to put out a video every other day, every 3 days, every 4 days. I have a life, and this is a very important part that I want to incorporate into my life, maybe even be my full-time job, helping myself, helping other people, helping my kids. So I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you staying and digesting this material with me, and I hope it helps you. So thank you, and I'll see you next video.